Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fringe podcast. So I'm Dr. Genevieve Newton. I am the scientific director at Fringe, occasional host of the podcast. And I'm here today with Rita Mastrangelo. So Rita is from Purely Functional Nutrition, and we are together today basically to talk to you about holistic therapies for autism. So I'm going to come at things from the perspective of red light therapy. Rita is going to share with us her extensive knowledge about autism as related to really like functional nutritional medicine. And she comes from this perspective personally. She's the mom to a 15-year-old son named Jordan, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. And through some very challenging experiences, was led to explore this entire very complex world of functional nutrition. So Rita has become a certified functional nutrition health coach. She's also a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and she started her company Purely Functional Nutrition that helps families who have children with autism. And in her practice, Rita really focuses on using nutritional and functional lab testing to expose those hidden stressors, the things that are really kind of hard to identify without doing that, those deep dives that are really the root cause of autism. And she works with clients using lifestyle, nutrition, and supplements to improve health. So really interesting stuff, very relevant to a lot of people. And Rita, thank you for being here with us today.
Hey, you're very welcome.
Okay, so I'd love to start off, just kind of paint a picture for people. When you have somebody come in to see you, so you've got a family and it's a new person, new group that you're encountering. Can you sort of just talk us through how would you go through a diagnostic process with them? What are you looking for and how do you find it?
For sure. So my practice is virtual. So when I speak with families, typically moms, it's over a Zoom call. And, the world of autism, I just wanted to share, is very complex. And when I'm listening to a family, a mom, I'm not looking at the diagnosis, because many children that are diagnosed with autism have a lot of behavioral issues that contribute to their autism diagnosis, right? But it's merely at a behavioral level. And so the first thing I focus on is really understanding what the child is going through, what got their autism diagnosis, right? So I look at patterns. What is, the child currently eating? Is the child a picky eater? How is the child when it comes to digestion? Are they constipated? What does their poop look like? Poop is, very important. How are they sleeping? Do they sleep through the night? Do they wake up in the middle of the night? Do they have issues even going to bed? And then I ask about, their behaviors or what life really looks like at home. And all of those behaviors are really going to tell me where the body is struggling. And so from there, if a family works with me in my practice, we really start with the foundations, right? The nutrition. Many children are picky eaters, so we have to start building on food variety. And I start with stealth nutrition. So I'm looking at what the child is currently eating and see how I can incorporate nutrient dense foods to the foods that they're already eating. So we're not compromising taste, we're not compromising smell. And this way we're starting to add those good nutrients, those nutrients that start building that diversity that their gut is lacking, right? With that, then I focus on lifestyle. Then I really, part of my practice is incorporating or relying on functional lab tests, because the functional lab tests give me a clear picture of what might be contributing to the dysfunction, the imbalances that's going on in the body, right? Nothing can really replace lab testing. No intake form, no checklist can really provide the accurate information as functional lab tests do. And so with a child that has that diagnosis, they already have complex issues. And so no doubt there's going to be a lot of elevations on the functional lab tests, but it doesn't leave me guessing as to where the dysfunction is. And so understanding their nutrition, understanding the lifestyle, and getting those markers on the functional lab tests, I'm able to provide an individualized roadmap, right? So there's not one protocol that is for every child. It really is individualized, and it's really a step-by-step process that I help families with as they navigate through the Growing Up Resilient program. That's the program that I offer families.
Okay, amazing. So it sounds like there's layers, right? So you're seeing what's going on kind of at the lifestyle level and the nutritional level, and then you use that functional lab testing. I'm sure that by this point you're almost validating some of the things that you already know or suspect you're going to see. But I would love to hear more about, first of all, what are some of these functional lab tests that you run? You don't have to tell us about all of them, but tell us about your favorite. Would love to hear about those. And then second, what sort of results do you typically see from those tests?
Yeah, so there's many functional lab tests that I've run on Jordan. And unfortunately, there isn't just one functional lab test that will give you all the information. So I run 4 functional lab tests with all the families: an organic acid test, a stool test, a total toxin test, and a mineral test. And so each test gives me great information, but I need other tests to complement them. So I don't treat the paper. I really connect the dots and I correlate with the behaviors of the child. But every child's lab results have imbalances. I would say 99% of the children have um, mold colonization in their gut, candida overgrowth. They have bacterial imbalances, mitochondrial dysfunction, methylation issues, neurotransmitter issues. When it comes to their gut health, many have low bacterial diversity, poor digestion, overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria because they're not eating a nutrient dense, fiber rich diet. And I know that there's a lot of these imbalances going on because these children are picky eaters, right? And so they're not eating those foundational foods that are going to support optimal gut health, but also at a cellular level, right? The foods that we eat are really to feed our cells,
Hmm.
right? And so I often see the body being under stress, right? And that will show up due to nutrient imbalances, oxidative stress, um, and all of these. Because of the gut that is imbalanced, then it's going to impact that gut brain connection, right? If you have inflammation, then those connections or that information is not going to get to the brain, right? We hear all the time what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut. And so the the resilience of the gut really is going to influence how the brain functions. And that's when we see the behavior, we see the mood, and we see the dysregulation, right? I also see a lot of environmental contributors to it. So, like where there's mold, there's mycotoxins. There's also a lot of heavy metals. Like there's no place for heavy metals in our body. Our body has no use for heavy metals, but it does cause a lot of neural inflammation, right? The organic acid test is one of my favorite tests. It's a urine test and it looks at the metabolites. So I always explain it as we're not looking at the fire, but we're looking at the smoke, right? And there's a lot of patterns on the organic acid test that suggest mitochondrial strains or mitochondrial dysfunction. And so that helps me understand how well the body is producing energy at a cellular level, right? I wanted to stress that the labs don't really replace the child. I use labs again just to get me that information so I'm able to create a plan for the child. Like I'm not treating the lab results, I'm interpreting them at those results in the context of what I'm seeing clinically, right? So again, anything I see on the lab results, I'm going to understand why the child is having issues sleeping or having issues with digestion or those behaviors and the dysregulation, right? Everything starts connecting.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly interesting to me. Um, and I was wondering, could you give maybe using Jordan as an example, could you give a few examples of some of the like a test result that you would see that you could map onto a specific behavior?
Yeah. So, arabinose is a marker on the organic acid test. And arabinose is a metabolite of candida overgrowth. And so we all have candida. It's just when it becomes opportunistic that it causes a lot of behaviors. So a lot of children with candida overgrowth, excuse me, will show signs of aggression, inappropriate behavior, giddiness, goofiness. Even sometimes they press their genital area, not because of pleasure, but because of that deep pressure that the body is seeking. Um, there's also the mitochondrial markers, the Krebs cycle metabolites that I'll know that about like their body is going through some type of stress, right? And I was going to share as well with Jordan. He had two markers on the organic acid test that were always elevated, the methylglutaric and the hydroxyglutaric. And that's indicative of mitochondrial stress. And so Jordan, my son, he always ate well. He eats exceptionally well, but it's like understanding why are these markers always elevated and why is he always rigid and stressed even when he speaks?
Right. So essentially, there's a dysfunction at the level of the mitochondria that's most likely happening at a genetic level. Um, that's that's really interesting because when you were talking about when you're talking about the candida, what I was thinking is that you would probably also see that correlating with like a craving for sugar, right? That one would I be correct in assuming that that's going to be a positive reinforcement cycle that, they crave more sugar, they eat more sugar, the candida gets worse and the behavior worsens as well.
Yes, 1,000%. So there's candida thrives off of sugar. Where there's candida, there's also high oxalates. But a lot of families that I speak to, they're always told to kill the candida. And so either they kill the candida, the behavior subsides, but then it comes back, or the candida marker is no longer elevated, but their child still experiences the behavior. And I share this all the time. Candida is not the problem. It's a result of the problem. It's become opportunistic because of something else. And so as an FDN, we're taught to always dig deeper. And so what can be contributing to candida overgrowth? Dysbiosis, right? Gut issues, could be heavy metals. It could be parasites. It could be H. pylori. It could be low copper. It could be not eating a balanced diet, right? We always have to understand what's causing the environment to be opportunistic. It's never one thing. So it's never about killing. It's always about those healing opportunities. Like even if a child has significant amounts of opportunistic bacteria on their stool test, it's not a matter of killing the opportunistic bacteria, but rather increasing the commensal bacteria.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it just sounds like you have to keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And what it made me think about, though, is what you were describing with Jordan and what you were seeing with his markers. That's different than the candida in obviously in that it's like you're essentially uncovering something at the most foundational level of that mitochondrial function. So what do you how do you test for that? Are you actually doing any genetic test to uncover like a polymorphism in an electron transport chain gene, for example, or is that testing not typically done?
Yeah, so it's not one of the tests that I start off with the families right away because any elevation on the any of the functional lab tests, we always try to bring balance back by bringing balance back to the gut, right? Building that resilience, restoring what's missing in the gut to function optimally. And just like everything else, when you start focusing on building balance back in the gut microbiome, then everything kind of starts to settle down on its own.
Okay, so you're really finding that if you had to, I guess, identify the most basic root cause of many of these behavioral challenges that you're seeing with your clients, it's coming down to the gut. Is that a fair statement?
For the most part, yes. For the most part, because then if I use Jordan as an example, he eats exceptionally well. He used to be a picky eater many, many years ago, but um, through my perseverance, I
Mhm.
guess, we worked on picky eating. We worked on, I guess, any imbalances. He did have a few parasites when I started this journey, but it wasn't his lab results weren't to the extent that I see now in many, many children. Like he didn't have a lot of mycotoxins, maybe a few that weren't even elevated because of maybe, the peanut butter that he was eating, like ochratoxins. But with Jordan, what I always found was every time I would retest, he would always have mitochondrial markers elevated.
Okay.
Right, and so I hope I'm not going off in another direction. Like, I know we were taught foundationally, because there's so much going on with the children that I work with, I always focus on those 4 functional lab tests. When we bring balance back and those markers now are in an optimal range, and then there's still other things going on, that's when we start looking at other testing.
Right.
And so for Jordan, when we continue to run these organic acid tests, we consistently saw these mitochondrial markers elevated, like I said, the methylglutaric, the hydroxyglutaric. I kind of put 2 and 2 together. It explained why he was always so rigid and uptight. So for Jordan, even when he would wake up in the morning and he started speaking, it was like the stress already started. And so one of my mentors, Dr. Kurt Weller, that taught me how to interpret an organic acid test, he recommended that we run a mito swab for Jordan, which would look more directly at how the electron transport chain was functioning. And, what I like about the mitoswab test is that it really gives a clear picture of where the inefficiencies are. However, it doesn't explain why those stresses are there in the first place. Right. And so when we ran the mitoswab test, we found in Jordan that complex 1 wasn't working efficiently. And then there were inefficiencies in complex 2 and 3. So, which confirmed that his cells were under strain. But I had run genetic testing on Jordan years prior, and it really wasn't explained to me at the level I believe it should have been explained because he has multiple genetic variants, but one of them was the SOD2 variant, which affects how the body handles oxidative stress at a mitochondrial level, right? So I guess when you put all that together, like it really painted a picture of mitochondrial stress for him and an increased um, oxidative load, I
Yeah,
guess you
absolutely.
can say. We also, with Jordan, I've been on this journey for many years. And so when I've done the foundational, it's like, okay, we need to dig deeper. We need to dig deeper. And so it was also recommended to me that we do plasmalogen testing and his plasmalogens, the white matter, um, they were very low. So again, from a cellular and mitochondrial membrane level, he was struggling. So that's when we started adding targeted support to help rebuild those levels.
Hmm.
And that's when we were introduced to red light therapy. And that's when we started using that with him as well.
Right, as a non-dietary or non-pharmacological intervention to help to support mitochondrial function. It's fascinating to hear how you've dug deep into all these layers to kind of get to the root of, in his case specifically, what is causing the mitochondrial dysfunction. Because we so often use this term, right? Mitochondrial dysfunction, and we use it now quite commonly with when we're referring to people with autism spectrum disorders. We use it when we're talking about people with ADHD. It's kind of one of those things that we've come to accept as being really a foundational pathology in a lot of these individuals. But yet, what you don't necessarily see is what is happening to really cause that mitochondrial dysfunction. Like you mentioned, three complexes in the electron transport chain that were affected. Um, and for those of you who are listening that remember back to your grade 11 biology, the electron transport chain it's got four complexes. It's a really complicated part of our and an essential part of our physiology. And this is where red light therapy comes in, right? It comes in at the electron transport chain, and it supports the production of cellular energy, specifically through effects on complex 4. So what have been your experiences then, Rita, with using red light therapy to support mitochondrial dysfunction?
Yeah. So Jordan, he used to stutter a lot. And that's when I would notice, okay, there's something going on with him now. But just to go back to the mitochondrial dysfunction, and when it comes to autism, I feel that when a child is diagnosed with autism, there's so many complex issues already going on with them. But when we start bringing balance back, a lot of children who have an autism diagnosis, they get better, right? They recover from the diagnosis is removed. Um, and then you have other children, let's say like Jordan, who doesn't have those imbalances, but is a neurodivergent individual that I guess is just different, right? So, and thinking different, behaving different as a neurotypical kid can be, or is. But um, for me, the what I really needed to focus on with Jordan is how to control, um, or how to gain that calm in his body that he's lacking. And so with Jordan, we started with a tri-light panel. And then over time, we started using the nasal device. And the stuttering has really reduced. The tri-light panel is great. Like it's a small one, and we were able to put it on his lower back and the back of his head. but I was really looking for one, or it was recommended to me from one of my practitioner chiropractor colleagues that I needed. What Jordan would benefit from was one over the head. And that was when I connected with you because Fringe offers a full head wrap that really allows more coverage across the brain.
Yeah, what you're describing is definitely the variation in how you can deliver light to the body, and I think the most important starting point for that is that it is a recognition that there are many different ways of doing this, right? There is the goal is to get light to the cells, to the tissues, and ideally, when we're talking about somebody who has autism, the main target that we want to get the light to is the brain. Now, that being said, there's some evidence that delivering light to other parts of the body, you'd mentioned the lower back or the back of the head, um, that also has been found to be beneficial. But when you look at, how do we get light to people in the most convenient way, the easiest way, especially for a child or a teenager or anybody who's
Anymore.
experiencing, right? It's helpful to have something that fits comfortably and that's portable. It's wireless. You can walk around while you use it, and so that is why we designed our head wrap the way that we did. Something else to point out when we start talking about this red light therapy in the brain, it is an important point that we can deliver a couple of different types of light to the body in red light therapy, right? We have red light, which is the red wavelength. And for those of you who are watching this, you can see I'm holding up a device, our head wrap, that is showing red light. But what you don't see in this is actually the light form that is the most important for brain health, which is near infrared light. So near infrared light is not visible to the eye, right? It's invisible, but we can feel it as a little bit of warmth, and it's an extremely powerful wavelength. So if we look at how this affects our mitochondrial health, they both act in essentially the same way. So they come in and they stimulate that electron transport chain on a cellular level to essentially increase the production of cellular ATP, which is our energy currency of our cell. But where they differ is that red light doesn't penetrate very deeply. So it stays more superficial. That's why if I was talking to you today about supporting skin health, we would be talking more about those red wavelengths because they penetrate a few millimeters into the skin. The near infrared light penetrates more deeply. And so when we look at the scientific research that's been done on supporting brain health, including for individuals with autism, pretty much exclusively, we're seeing that near infrared light as being the one. So that intranasal device that you were using, for example, may have only been a near infrared light delivery. Our products, we include both the red and the near infrared light. We do that very intentionally, and that's because we have superficial blood vessels all around our head, especially in this forehead area, around the back of the head as well. And so if you can get light as superficially and as deeply as possible, I think that you're going to have the best outcome. And there's also some differences in products with respect to the wavelength of near infrared light that's being used. So, for example, a lot of the devices on the market that are used for things like muscle health, recovery after sports, that type of thing, they will use near infrared light at around in the 800 nanometers. And when we're looking at the brain health research, sometimes those products go in the higher range. So when we were looking at all the literature and figuring out what the best wavelengths were to use to support brain health overall, we determined that we would use two forms of near infrared light. So we have one wavelength at 850 and then another at 1050 nanometers. So it just gives a broader coverage. And again, it's not to say that you have to have this longer wavelength in order to get benefit. The beautiful thing about red light therapy is that there are a lot of different ways to do it. And there are many different ways to get benefits. But overall, when we're looking at the research in this area on the brain targeting, most of it is using that near infrared light, but there are a range of wavelengths that get used. So you you had can you tell me any of the other things? Have you noticed anything else from Jordan's experience with red light therapy? You mentioned that the panel, and the intranasal and the stuttering. But did you find any effects on his behavior in any other way, Rita?
Yeah, so Jordan is his days are very structured, like he's very routine based. And in the past, it was very hard for him to accept a change in routine. And so that's decreased, which is great. His skin is better as well. He had, he'll be 16 in a few months, but he had severe acne. Like it was so, so, so bad. And so I think that would have contributed as well. I'm not saying that it's helped him with everything, right? Jordan does have a language impairment. His processing speed is a lot slower than most. And he acknowledges that, but he's at a point in his life where he just wants to continue to thrive, right? He's spending an intensive day at the chiropractor today. He's doing a lot of reflex integration, body balancing as well. Um, and so, yeah, I would definitely say that the red light therapy has helped. Like we even have a sauna that, when he's sick, he goes in. But I had a few questions for you
Yeah, absolutely.
with respect to the red light. Can you explain, what's actually going on when we're applying, let's say, the fringe
Hmm.
on the head? Like, how is it getting in at a intracellular level? Like, I think a lot of families, um, they think everything. If your child has received an autism diagnosis, it's not just one thing. So there's many layers that we need to go through to start bringing balance back. And it's not a quick fix and it's not linear. And there is no one magic pill or item that's going to help. It's a combination of things, right? And so, with the red light therapy, how is that applying it on the head? How is that actually, what's happening?
What's happening? Yeah,
What's
great
happening?
question. You had a very loaded lots of thoughts there that are super important in that question. One of which I wanted to comment on is raising this issue of red light therapy being one of your tools in your toolbox, right? It's going to come in to that big picture of how you're going to be addressing all of the issues that are at hand. And where it's unique is that it's a non-pharmacological intervention, right? So it's not a drug intervention. It's not a medical device per se. But it's not a lifestyle intervention really either, right? So it's a non-pharmacological supportive tool that you can use, and it goes into the toolbox, and it has an incredibly good safety profile. I do want to put a little caveat in that if you're using a device that's at a very high intensity, then the risk of increasing oxidative stress does increase. And so it can be used. It just requires more, I would say, attention to things like timing and hopefully working with somebody who would be a healthcare practitioner of some sort to help you to know how to navigate that higher intensity device. But when you use a light therapy device, it doesn't matter if you're putting it on your head, if you're putting it on your chest to support your lymphatics and your immune tissue in your neck and chest area, if you're putting it on your gut, if you're putting it on your low back because you have a low back strain, um, the mechanism is the same. And so what is happening is that depending on the wavelength, whether it be red or near infrared, there is absorption there's penetration, and then it will be absorbed by a molecule called a photoreceptor. And so the red light will be absorbed by photoreceptors more superficial in the skin. The near infrared will be absorbed by deeper photoreceptors. So what we want to have happen is that target photoreceptor be the electron transport chain molecule, which specifically it's called cytochrome C oxidase. It's the complex 4. And through that absorption, there is a release of nitric oxide, which some people in the autism space have heard about nitric oxide. It's a little tiny gas molecule that helps with blood flow. And ultimately, through this cascade of downstream events, you have an increase in the synthesis of the cellular energy. And on the other hand, there are some other photoreceptors. So one of them is water, and our cells are full of water. And this is a very underappreciated aspect of red light therapy that's really only starting to be recognized. I suspect that 10 years from now, we're going to perhaps look at this as being one of the dominant mechanisms. It also maps onto ATP production, as well as other things. So when water, which doesn't react with the red, it reacts with the near infrared. It absorbs that near infrared light, absorbs the light. There is a change in the water structure such that it becomes a little bit more viscous. And so when the ATP is being synthesized in that mitochondria, it actually helps in relation to the viscosity of that mitochondrial water. So there are a few different things that can be happening, but the main outcome that we're looking at is the umbrella effect is an improvement in that metabolic health of the cell. And this is why we see it being so relevant for people who have mitochondrial diseases, mitochondrial dysfunction, is because it helps to support the production of cellular energy, which can restore some of that function, if not all of that function, to the cell. This is where you see it being so important to include those lifestyle factors too, though, right? Because if you're adding insults with diet or environmental toxins that are coming in and, causing mitochondrial dysfunction, well, you can add red light therapy to help to support your mitochondria, but it's not going to be the same as if you have, the generalized
Mhm.
mitochondrial support. I think one of the things that you're mentioning or wondering about with putting a device like this onto your head, and everybody has this question, and it's such a valid question, which is this actually getting into my brain? Like, how is it getting into the brain? So I wish I had a very simple answer for you for that question. I don't. What I will tell you is that we can look at this from two perspectives. We can look at it from a body of research studies that have taken cadaver skulls and have looked at, does the light actually penetrate through the hair, through the skull, into the brain? And you say, no, it's not really penetrating very much. There can be a tiny little bit of photons traveling through to some extent. But this doesn't make sense. This direct, deep brain penetration isn't really happening. But then we look over at the clinical literature, and we see that when we apply light to the head, in a wide range of brain disorders, ranging from Alzheimer's disease to Parkinson's disease to depression to autism to ADHD, we see benefits. And so when we see those clinical benefits, then you have to say, okay, so the clinical benefits are most likely not happening because there's this really deep brain penetration, but there are other things that must be going on. So one of the disconnects between that research where you're taking a cadaver skull and you're taking a live brain is the fact that this is a fully functioning living system with blood flow, lymphatic flow, energy transmission, right? All of these things are happening in a live brain that are not happening in a what we call an ex vivo model. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that we know that it's all interconnected, right? And so some of the studies on Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease specifically have applied light to the gut, and they found benefits to the brain, right? And so that speaks to that gut-brain axis. So we really do like to, as humans, reduce things down to explain them in the most simple reductionist terms, but that's just not how the body functions. So what I look at as a researcher is, if I find a good research study, meaning a study that was well controlled, well designed, and I see benefit, um, that's what I'm looking for, right? If I'm going to recommend something to people. And so when I looked at the literature for autism, what I found were a series of around 4 studies that I consider to be reasonably well done, but one of them is a standout because this one study was controlled. It used a placebo device. It used a placebo-controlled light therapy device, and it compared that to an actual light therapy device. And it for 8 weeks of delivering light to the brain, so we call this transcranial photobiomodulation in the scientific research, they found statistically significant reductions. And so in the group that was, so the group of uh, children with autism that were delivered the actual near infrared light therapy, they had reductions in their autism severity scores. So that's a subjective measurement. But very, very importantly here, they also found EEG changes. So that's an objective result. And when I see that, and then I look at the other studies that were done, so these ones were not controlled, but they also found benefits. And then I look at the animal model literature. So there is an animal model of autism. And these studies have found objective measurements. So they've found decreases in oxidative stress, and they've found decreases in brain inflammation, which we cause neuroinflammation. So a limitation, of course, is that we don't have big studies using hundreds of subjects. Okay, that's absolutely a limitation. But what we do have is a small number of studies, one of which was very well controlled. We have animal studies, and we have both subjective and objective measurements, and there's an enormous amount of internal consistency. This literature is also consistent with what we see when we look at the Alzheimer's literature, when we look at the depression literature. And so because of that, and because of the incredible safety profile of red light therapy, I am very comfortable saying that to support brain health, applying light to the brain, to the head is I don't want to, the term I'm coming to my mind is that it's a no-brainer, but that's just, that's kind of silly to say in this state. But there's really no downside. There's no downside. There's only upside.
So now I have 3 questions.
Yes.
But you briefly spoke about the gut, and I wanted you to elaborate on that. But before that, I know that there's a lot of chiropractors that focus on red light therapy, and some of them like have
A laser.
a laser, but it's red light. And so I don't know if that's the same, how it's different. And I ask that because many families in my program that are going to see this video are going to ask, because a lot of them spend a lot of money on therapy and treatment. And so if someone can save money and get a great product, then I'd rather bring them that route, because on this journey, you're spending a lot of money on speech therapy, ABA therapy, OT, chiropractor. And so do you know what they look like a wand maybe?
It's a laser. So the difference between LED lights and lasers is essentially in the way that the light is delivered, the collimation of the light beam. So a laser is going to deliver a single wavelength of light at a very high intensity. That's why they're only used for a very short period of time. Whereas an LED light delivers a range. So for example, we have this device that is delivering what we call three different wavelengths of light. So one of them would be the 850 nanometer near infrared. Now, it's a bit of a misnomer to say that it's 850 nanometers, because when we measure it, and we do measure using a third-party lab all of our products, and we post this on our website so people can see the spectral output. What you'll see is a range of so for 850 would be our peak nanometer, but it delivers a range of nanometers from about 820 to about 880. So that's one difference. Laser is a single wavelength, LED light will be a range of wavelengths. The second difference is that level of intensity. So the laser is extremely high intensity, the LED is low intensity. Now, the proponents of lasers always say that you can't possibly mimic a laser with an LED light because you can't match that intensity. But it turns out when we look at all of the research in totality, and there are thousands of studies that have been done on red light therapy. Early ones all used lasers, but since then, over the last few decades, we've transitioned into using more and more LEDs because they are safer, they're cheaper, and they're easier to use. What happens at the level of our body is that what the body is interested in is the dose of light. And so dose is a function of treatment time and intensity. And if we want to match a dose of light using a laser and an LED, we can. We just have to do that math. So that's why our head wrap is meant to be used for 10 to 20 minutes. A laser is meant to be used for usually only 30 seconds,
Mm,
a short period of time.
okay.
Yeah, so
So it kind
that's
of
the
balances out, and it's not a huge difference in time either.
right, and the other part about lasers can be dangerous, right? They generally need to be administered in a clinic by a trained professional. There are some at-home devices that use lasers. Um, Now, for people with autism specifically, and especially people like Jordan, who you mentioned, could have a SOD polymorphism, meaning they're more sensitive to oxidative stress, right? So that's a change in that superoxide dismutase enzyme, which is responsible for dealing with some of the reactive oxygen species in your body. The higher the intensity of the light, the greater the cellular stress, meaning you are kind of always nudging up on that level at which you can tip the cell into an increase in oxidative stress rather than what you're trying to achieve, which is a decrease. So I generally am much more comfortable recommending LED-based light therapy because our wiggle room is much greater. We're much less likely to overdo it in terms of time. You'd have to wear this thing for probably the entire day in order to, well, not that long, but for quite a
Yeah.
period of time in order to get to the point at which you've stressed your cells out. But for somebody who has a challenge with their endogenous antioxidant systems, like how their body deals with antioxidants, you have a lower threshold. You don't want to push up against that limit because their body is less capable of dealing with it, right? So um, from my perspective, LED-based light therapy, after looking at and dealing with this issue in depth, trying to figure out, do we need lasers in order to get benefits? The answer has been very clearly shown, no, we do not need lasers. Can we get benefits from lasers? Absolutely. Can we get benefits from LED? Absolutely. So then it's a matter of weighing those other issues. Are you, do you want to go into a clinic and have this done, or would you prefer to be able to do it in the comfort of your own home? I mean, in some ways, that increases compliance to the point where the LED therapy will end up being superior because you can do it more frequently as opposed to the laser therapy. But as you said, this is something that many people do as part of their practice. They'll talk about mapping out specific parts of the brain, and there is something to be said for that, no question about it. So when we're dealing with applying light therapy to the brain, there's also something that's called neuromodulation, and neuromodulation can occur using things like pulsed light or targeting specific parts of the brain, like the default mode network. And there is research on that, and there are benefits to that. I would say that there are benefits because there are benefits to both approaches. Using a very simple at-home LED-based light therapy, benefits there, and then there are benefits to the other approach. Going into a clinic, using a neuromodulatory approach, using a laser. There's benefits there. So I think it's really just up to people to decide what works best for
Mhm.
their budget, what works best for their lifestyle, and what they're most comfortable with.
And so if someone were to want to purchase one, what would you recommend to be a safe um, level
Hmm.
or safe amount of time? Like how long? I know with Jordan, you had said to do the lower dosage. And it like, so if someone is just starting out, um, what level would they start at? How many times a week? How long?
Yep. Yep. Great question. So the first thing that we have to talk about in order to answer that question would be, what is the intensity of the device that you're going to be using, right? So some of the devices on the market are higher intensity, and then some of them are lower intensity. When we looked at the scientific literature, we found a range of intensities that were published. Our value at Fringe, from a just a brand perspective, is that we always look to nature to guide our decision making. And so we found many studies using light at the intensity of the sun that were beneficial. There are studies using higher intensity light that are also beneficial. But again, because of that issue of needing to control the timing to reduce the risk of harm, especially through oxidative stress, we chose to go for a device that delivered a lower intensity of light. So it's specifically, we mirror the intensity of the sun, which is between 20 and 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared for those red and near infrared rays. Um, and then we do it for a longer period of time. So for our head wrap, our treatment time would be 20 minutes would be our maximum. And there are some people who would choose to go at around a 10-minute. Now, with people with autism, though, we have to be more intentional with our kind of lead in to this, because when you're talking about people who can have sensory issues, it's
Mhm.
really important to start low and slow. So if you were coming and talking to me about Jordan, for example, and I was counseling you, I would actually recommend for him, were he totally naive as far as red light therapy, which he's not. But let's say he'd never had any red light therapy before, and I knew he had an SOD1 gene polymorphism. I would recommend starting him at 5 minutes a day for at an intensity of 50%. So our devices, when you turn them on, you get a full light intensity, so that's 100%. But then there's a button that you can push that reduces the intensity by 50%. So I would have him starting at 5 minutes at 50% for a week, monitoring his response 3 to 5 times a week as the treatment frequency that we recommend, and just making sure that he didn't have any adverse responses, like no increase in hyperactivity, no headaches, no eye pain, very, very uncommon results, but that's always better to go slow with your approach rather than having to pull back afterwards. If he didn't have that SOD mutation, I would still start him at 5 minutes, but I would keep it at 100%. And then over the course of 2 weeks, I would work my way up to trying 10 minutes and then 15 minutes. And if they're able to comfortably work at 20 minutes, that's a great treatment time at this intensity. Higher intensity devices, typically you don't want to go above 10 minutes. And when I say higher intensity, that's a device that's going to be at around 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. There is controversy over whether devices actually are as high as they say they are. There are many devices on the market that when you measure the true intensity by a third party, it turns out that it's not that high. There's a systemic issue in this market of using incorrect measurement tools to get that intensity. So what I would say to people, if you want to shop around and you want to look for a product, you want to make sure that the intensity is below 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared. You want to make sure that there's third-party testing on the device that actually validates what that intensity is, so that you can look at it. And I would recommend that devices, at the very least, it's not going to be a red light only device for the brain. It's going to be a light that includes red and near infrared, or it will be a near infrared light only device. So, as I said, we've included 2 wavelengths of near infrared light and 1 red in our head wrap, and we have a ratio of chips that are a 1 red to 2 near infrared light chip ratio. So we really focus on the near infrared light because it's the one that penetrates more deeply. But
Mhm.
then the red light will be there to get that more superficial penetration. So, yeah, that's what I would recommend in terms of that lead in, ultimately working up to 3 to 5 times a week. We always get asked, is it safe to do it every day? At a lower intensity, like the Fringe devices, yes, it is safe to do this light therapy every day. Almost all of the research in this field, though, in the field of brain health, uses a frequency of that's lower than that. Very rarely is daily frequency used, but it is sometimes. So what I've come away with from spending years now looking at this science, looking at hundreds and hundreds of studies, is just the recognition that when it comes to light therapy, there's no one way to do it. And so you have flexibility. You can look at what works best for your child, for your lifestyle. You don't need to stress about, if I miss a day, if I miss 2 days, oh my gosh, we're going to go backwards. You can do it in the way that works best for you. It's most important to be consistent, but benefits have been observed using frequencies of like 2 times a week all the way to 7 times a week.
Okay, thank you for all of that. And if we have time, I just wanted to ask about how we can use the fringe for gut health.
For gut health, yeah, absolutely. So gut health, as you mentioned, we talked so much about this at the beginning. It's such an important part of so many of these brain disorders, right? We have this gut brain axis that is critical to the proper functioning of our brain. And there's an emerging area of research, I would say. I don't want to overstate how much research has been done in this area with respect to the gut and the brain. But the research has been ongoing. We have some good research coming out of both animal models and human models. In humans, I haven't seen any studies with autism, but I have seen studies with Alzheimer's, with depression, and with Parkinson's disease. And so the approach that's being taken is to target both the gut and the brain with light therapy. Here again, I would definitely say that you want to make sure that your device has near infrared light. If you want that penetration into the gut, you're going to need that near infrared light to get in deeper. And there's been actual demonstration of changes in the gut microbiome. So changes in the gut microbiome towards a more favorable profile, as well as changes in the cognitive and behavioral observations or outcomes that are being measured. So it's really easy to do. It depends on the device that you have. Many devices for the head are not able to be used for the gut as well. We designed ours so that it can be used on both areas. So our device opens up and can be laid flat, and it fits very nicely along the gut. So you can fold it up and put it on the head as a hat, or you can open it up and just sit it on the gut, and it'll cover both that sort of upper abdomen as well as the lower abdomen. In terms of protocols, this is one where I find people often prefer to alternate days rather than treat both areas in the same day. And a very easy approach to use is one day you treat the head, the next day you treat the gut, one day you treat the head, the next day you treat the gut, and then you take one day off a week. And that will get you at 3 times a week. And for the most, it's quite easy to use the head wrap with anyone because they can put it on and they can walk around, they can do what they need to do while they're wearing it. For the gut, if you're dealing with children, it's a great opportunity when they're having a quiet time and they're sitting and maybe they're on their iPad, you just put it on there. You can secure it with a Velcro strap around the waist. And so we do have Velcro straps that come with our other wraps. We don't have one with the Fringe wrap, but we'd be happy to provide them for people. And it's also something you can just go and get a tensor bandage and kind of wrap
Mhm.
it around. But absolutely that gut brain axis. And one of the things that's really been kind of notable in this gut research is that you're seeing effects not just on the microbiome, you're seeing effects on the human host as well. So it's like you're getting in, the light is getting in and benefiting two organisms, right? All of the bacterial species, but also the human gut tissue itself. So I think there's a lot of potential for benefit here, and we're going to see a lot more research in this area, especially with our kids with things like autism and ADHD.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that was great. You've answered all the questions that I potentially see families asking me. So, who best to get the answers from than the expert,
Oh, well, thank
which
you, thank
is
you.
you.
Thank you. And we're also at Fringe, I mean, it's so important to us to communicate with our customers. We have real people on the other end of our customer service, and they reach out to our medical team when they have questions that they can't answer, and loop us in. So if anybody has any specific questions, please feel free to reach out. We do also have a blog that's going to be coming out probably next week on using light therapy for ADHD and autism. And there'll be some links to the studies that have been published, as well as some suggestions on protocols. And so that'll be a resource for information as well. People will be able to find that on our website. So if you go to www.fringeheals.com, we have a learn section. So that's one of our drop down menus. Just go to learn, and also sign up for our newsletter. We publish a lot of blogs. I write all the blogs. Our blogs are very, detailed in terms of their scientific referencing and information. And so we like to share that with people, but not overwhelm. We don't overwhelm you with emails. And
Yeah.
yeah. So
And I just wanted to say this is not just limited to children with complex needs, like children diagnosed with autism, ADHD. This is really for anyone, just like nutrition and lifestyle is for everyone.
I agree. Thank you for mentioning that. There was even a study that was recently published looking at kind of using red light therapy at the family level, and it was used with children and parents, and just talking about the different benefits that were observed. And these devices can be shared across family members, right? So we made our head wrap so that it's adjustable. It fits on tiny heads and it fits on bigger heads. If you have a very small head, it may end up being a little bit loose, but it's designed so that it can accommodate different,
Mhm.
people across the age span and different genders as well. So
Yeah, and I think what's good too is, a lot of children have these sensory issues. Like I know for me, Jordan years ago, he would never wear a hat. Um, but children learn through their peers or from their peers and from their parents. So even when I um, share with moms that, breathing would help your child calm down, and they say, well, they're not going to know how to do that. But if you do it with them a few times, then they're going to want to mimic you, just like the fringe. Like you can put it on yourself and they're going to get curious. So even starting slowly, just put it on their head and, count 5 seconds. So you're already desensitizing them from that feeling. And
I
so slowly every child will get used to it and it will be accepted.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I mean, I use the head wrap on a regular basis for cognitive health. There have been 9 studies to date that have been published on using red light therapy, that transcranial
Yeah.
photobiomodulation approach, in people who are generally of healthy cognition, which are the hardest to find benefits in a research context. I know this because I used to do brain research, and so it's quite remarkable that in healthy adults, using red light therapy applied to the head has improved aspects of cognition, including things like memory. And so I use it usually 3 times a week. It also helps support hair growth, which can be great for menopausal women and
Yeah.
men, etc. So there's it's very diverse.
I was gonna start using it for myself because I feel that I'm forgetting things.
Yes. Yes.
And so, yeah, like going back to what I had said, it really benefits everyone in
Yeah.
the family.
Yeah. I agree completely. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Rita. I think we had a great
Yeah,
conversation, and
it
it
was
was
my
really,
pleasure.
yeah, it's really interesting to learn about all the different things that you're doing. And so, where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram. My handle is Rita underscore purely functional nutrition. That's the best way to find me. I do have a website, Purely Functional Nutrition, but I share most of my information on Instagram. And
Okay.
if anyone wants to schedule a call with me, it's in my bio as well. There's a link there. But anytime anyone wants to reach me, they can just send me a DM or an email. I'm always quick to respond. At the end of the day, my hope for every family I connect with is to leave them with clarity on how to move forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everybody for listening today. And please join us next time.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.